Hey there, it's Kyle Boone, aka Strong Jaw, staff writer at CBS Sports. Welcome to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel. Back with me today, Adam Finklestein, 247 Sports Director of Recruiting, Scout Extraordinaire, Mr. Do Everything for 247. Fink, how are we doing today? It's been a minute.
I'm great. It's draft season. No more of
I love it.
these, the NBA playoffs, draft season. I'm fired up.
I am too. Some exciting news that we're bringing today. We're going to be in your feed every single week talking about the 2023 NBA draft class leading up to obviously the NBA draft later this summer. We're going to talk about Victor Wembanyama. We're going to talk about Victor Wembanyama. We will probably talk about Victor Wembanyama, and we'll also talk about Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller, some of the top prospects in this draft. Throughout the next couple months, we'll try to hit the draft from a number of different angles, talking about how we evaluate this class based off film, based off who we've talked to, and how some of the front offices in the NBA view this class. So should be really interesting. Today, we're actually going to lead the discussion with, guess who? Victor Wembanyama. That's right. Victor Wembanyama, 7'4", 8-foot wingspan, French prospect. He's 19 years old, widely viewed as the number one prospect in this class. And I don't want to speak for Finkelstein, but he is number one on my big board. He's leading the Pro A in scoring. He's leading the Pro A in rebounding, in block shots. And I think a lot of people view Wembanyama as a generational prospect, one of the best basketball prospects that we've seen. And in the conversation, I think along with, Anthony Davis, LeBron James as one of the best number one prospects in a class. So, Fink, I know I do have a tendency to veer into the hyperbole when I talk about prospects. So I did do some gushing there about Wembanyama. You tend to reel me back with some level-headed analysis. So you tell me how you view Wembanyama, what you've seen from him overseas, and kind of how you project him into the NBA.
Yeah, I do bring my ornery disposition to these evaluations, no doubt about it. But I think that, let's take it from this standpoint. If I'm going to assume that, maybe everybody watching this does not follow the draft year round like you and I do. So if that's the case, if you're just starting to get into the draft because it's less than 2 months away now, this is the guy that everybody is talking about. There's not a debate about who's going to be the number one pick in this draft. It will be Victor Wembanyama. You pronounce his name better than I do, so I'm just going to call him Wemby from this point on. So it's going to be Wemby. Everyone knows it. It is no secret. It is not a debate. People have used the generational type talent. The word unique gets used a lot in not just in basketball circles, but in general life discourse. But he truly is unique because of the overlap of size, length, and skill. I don't know that at this age we have ever seen a prospect who can protect the rim as well as he can, who can move as well as he can at his size, who has the shot making ability and the offensive flashes that he does. So, whatever words you want to use, unicorn, whatever. There's a chance that he could be all that. Now, he is because we've never seen someone like him before. We also don't have reasonable expectations in terms of how to keep him healthy. How is he going to move as well as he does? And that is probably the biggest question that people have. We can get into the nitty gritty of his game, but the bottom line is that if he stays healthy and if that body type proves to be durable, there's every reason to expect him to be a dominant player down the road. Based on what we're seeing at this point in time. And what we're seeing at this point in time is a truly game-changing defender who offensively is going to be an outstanding talent because of his shot-making ability at his size, because of the flashes of just extreme length. There was a play a couple weeks ago where he missed a three-point shot and followed up, got his own rebound, caught it in midair and dunked it. And, that kind of set social media on fire because I'd certainly never seen that before. And it's just crazy, the length and stuff he does. So I think sometimes, one of the challenges of this job is to try and find different ways to articulate players and player types, when sometimes there's a lot of overlap and similarities between what different players bring to the table. But Wemby is really unique and has a chance to, and there's a reason why people are calling him a generational type prospect. But, he's still really, really young. He's got to stay healthy, and he's got to, avoid all the traps that go along with being such a celebrated youngster.
Yeah, there's a saying, I'm a businessman, but I'm a business, man. And
I think that's a song, isn't it? Is that a song?
No, I just made it up.
Okay.
It might be a song lyric. I feel like that fits Wembanyama pretty well, and I think that's really exciting if you're into Wembanyama and what he's going to be at the NBA level, because they've done features at Sports Illustrated, at ESPN about Wembanyama, talking about the team around him, how grounded they are. They have purposely tried to keep him out of the spotlight. They do exercises on his feet specifically, and like stretching his feet. Yeah. They know kind of the struggles and maybe some things, trying to foresee what he may be up against as someone who is 7'4", who plays the way that he does. And I think that's really important. And it seems like he has the right team around him, which is obviously really encouraging too. There's a lot of, if he stays healthy, he's going to be great caveats. And obviously, like Zion, if he can stay healthy, he's going to be great. There's a lot of players that I think you can throw that caveat into. But Wembanyama, I think really can be special. What are you expecting from Wembanyama in terms of what he can be in the NBA early in his career? Because I think if you want to knock Wembanyama and maybe say nitpick a little bit about his game, the tall frame is awesome. The skinny frame is maybe like slightly scary. And so maybe, when you talk to scouts, like they think, okay, well, maybe he needs to add some muscle or something. And then you hear from Wembanyama's camp, it's like, we're not really trying to add muscle. Like, we're trying to be very strategic. We're not trying to bulk up because we think it could end up like hurting him and his frame long-term. So as a rookie, like, is this guy the clear rookie of the year favorite? Or is this a guy who, like, he's a great prospect and maybe in a few years he will clearly be the best player, but going from the pro A to the NBA level may be like a bit of an adjustment for him?
Well, he's playing at a really high level of competition right now, but I think you bring up a good point about his body and how they are really taking a long-term view of it. Unless this has changed, or at least up until very recently, he hadn't even begun lifting or strength training on a full-time basis because they wanted to let his body grow and extend on its own organically, because his level of growth was, again, somewhat unprecedented. So I think what you can expect next year is that because of the level of talent he has and because of the level of upside he has, he's very likely going to go to a situation, regardless of team, where they're going to give him a lot of room to grow and to develop. This is not a player that you're going to want to put in a box and stunt his growth in any way, shape, or form. So I think, like most rookies, like even Paolo this year, for as dominant as he was, Wemby is potentially a higher level of ceiling, and he's not going to be as physically ready as someone like Paolo. And I listen, Paolo's not a good comp, but given that he's the reigning rookie of the year, just kind of going with that as a context for the conversation. So Wemby's got to grow into his body. He's got to figure out exactly what position he defends. Some people have said it's the 5, some people have said it's the 4, but I think what you're going to see is teams, whoever drafts him, their top priority is going to be his development. And I think that priority is going to supersede even potentially winning games in the short term, because this is a guy that if he maximizes his potential, immediately gives his team championship aspirations in the long term, not next year, certainly. But if he becomes what people project he may be able to, then he's going to build a championship contender around him. So given that upside, this is a player who, whoever drafts him, is very likely to let him evolve, let him grow, kind of throw him into the fire and let him figure it out. So I think there's going to be some growing pains in that type of situation. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I envision one of these teams that, maybe they're not in the playoffs, but they're like one of your favorite watches midweek, because you get to watch this guy grow and develop. And then we'll see what happens during the course of the year. So rookie of the year, is that a possibility? Sure. But I don't think that's as much of a foregone conclusion as him being the number one pick is, because there are other players who are going to come in more physically ready. I think Wemby's probably the favorite to be the rookie of the year, but I don't think it's as much of a lock as it is that he'll be the number one pick, because if you're going to Vegas and you're putting money on anybody else to be the number one pick, you might as well just send it to you or me.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. And to your point, like if he goes to the Spurs, for example, and the Spurs are maybe not the most competitive team when he is a rookie, and they give him some leeway to develop, to make some mistakes, to really make that transition, that's kind of like a win-win situation, because you're developing your number one guy, and also like you might not be very good, and so you're positioning yourself potentially for the 2024 NBA draft, where you can potentially, and the Spurs have a pretty good roster, but you could potentially add another top 5, top 10 guy to your roster to pair next to Wembanyama. Yeah. So something to consider, and I'm sure teams are very much aware of this, and kind of they'll figure it out on the fly. Like if they can get Wembanyama, they'll do whatever.
If you get Wemby, you build around him. I look at Houston, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole here, because I know we're not trying to go too long on this. But if you get Wemby, every decision you make from that point on becomes based around him. From a personnel standpoint, do I want this guy around Wemby on a daily basis? Do I want that guy around on a daily basis? So I think his talent level is so high that if you get him on your team, he becomes a part of every single decision you make from a basketball perspective.
All right. Already upsetting the Jalen Green truthers on our first episode. This is fantastic. Well done, Fink. Well done.
He's not the guy I'm talking about, but that's all right.
Let's dive into our next topic. We're going to talk about the number 2 prospect, or who we think the number 2 prospect candidates are for this 2023 NBA draft class. Before we do that, let's take a quick break. I'll pass it over to Mr. Nada Edwards.
A Paramount Plus subscription is now included with your Walmart Plus membership.
Tell the world what happens when they cross me.
For no additional cost, members get a mountain of entertainment.
Are you accusing me of something?
This is great!
Sign up for a Walmart Plus membership and watch all of this and more with your Paramount Plus subscription.
I'm gonna trust you on this.
Okay, Fink. So there is much to talk about in this 2023 NBA draft class. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about Victor Wembanyama over the next few months leading up to the draft. And trust me, we'll talk plenty about that. But I do think that the most interesting non-Wemby topic, the storyline that I'm watching in this class, who's number 2? Who's number 2? Because you go to the LeBron James draft in 2003. Darko Milicic went number 2. The Anthony Davis draft in 2012, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist went number 2. But this year feels like there's more star power than some of those top classes with some of the generational prospects. You have Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller, Cam Whitmore. The Thompson twins, I think, could be in the mix. Maybe more. Who do you see in this class as kind of the contenders to be number 2? Because I think we both agree, barring something just completely insane, I don't think Wembanyama will go outside of number 1. Like, we can probably pencil that in. Who do you think?
You can pen that in. That's done.
Yeah.
Short of a major injury in the next 6 weeks, and I mean major, it won't be a consideration. Number 2, I think, is probably a 2-player race at this point. I know you just you mentioned 5 guys there. I'm not. I know you are do you have like a Cam Whitmore shirt or some type of paraphernalia over there that you can, you just slipped Cam Whitmore in as the 2nd pick in the draft.
I know, I need to get on it. I need to get on it because last year AJ Griffin was my guy. Like, I was pumping AJ Griffin as top 10 guy.
Right,
And
right. Yeah, that was good.
everyone's
All
like
right, so
accusing me. Like, yeah. So this is Cam Whitmore is my guy for this cycle.
all right.
Just gonna throw it out there. Just throwing it out
Noted.
there.
So out of respect for your track record, I will not make any comments about what he may become in the NBA down the road.
Okay.
What I will say is that I do not think he is currently in the mix for most NBA teams as a top 2 pick. So I think for most teams, it's going to come down to Miller and Henderson. And, the theory at the beginning of the year was that the top 2 picks were locked in. It was going to be Wemby and it was going to be Henderson. That's why you saw those exhibition games in Vegas this fall where those two went head to head. But then, Brandon Miller comes in and has one of the best freshman seasons we've seen in a long, long time. And blew away expectations. I'm going to put my high school recruiting hat on for a little bit. I mean, this is a guy in high school who had a high upside, but never really turned potential into production. In fact, played on the same EYBL team as Nick Smith and was thought to be, coming out of COVID, he was the guy we thought was going to be Batman. Nick Smith was going to be Robin. It basically inverted itself. And then final rankings were kind of, representative of that. They get to college and it flips. And Brandon Miller is far and away the best freshman in the country. A guy who in high school was known for his work in the mid-range area is now a 3-point shooter who saw his playmaking ability grow and evolve throughout the course of the season, even, being able to come off ball screens. For the fact that he's, still lean and undeveloped physically, he's got a nose for the ball and he's rebounding it on the glass. And then there's just, so much untapped upside. Obviously there's some off the court issues that teams are going to dive into. I think, you have to not acknowledge that would be to be disingenuous, but in terms of what we've seen on the court, he makes a very strong case to be the number 2 pick overall. And, if we're talking my big board, I think right now I have Miller number 2 in terms of if we were talking about a mock, whether or not team needs start to become a factor could be interesting. But I really do expect it'll be either Miller or Scoot in the number 2 spot. But what do you think?
Yeah, I just hyped up Cam Whitmore, but Scoot Henderson is the guy who I have number 2 in this class. And
Okay.
I'm not going to dig my heels in and say this is definitely going to happen. He's clearly the number 2 guy. I could be swayed either way between Scoot and Brandon Miller. I see the case for both of those guys at number 2. I think there's some concern about Scoot, how he did or did not develop as a shooter this past season with the G League. I think maybe some people thought he would develop a little bit quicker, a little bit better with G League Ignite this past season than he actually did. But the competitive nature he plays with, the athleticism, the pretty seamless, I think, projection to the NBA as kind of a lead guard, someone who can kind of carry your team, I think is all right there. Brandon Miller, though, clearly has a case. He's 6'9". He shoots above 40% from 3. A guy who I think can be kind of an attacking wing, a secondary creator type guy. And obviously big wings in the NBA who can switch and play multiple positions is perfect. That is exactly where the NBA is going. So,
and if they shoot.
Yeah. So it may just, honestly, to your point, it may just be a matter of flavor, which team is picking at number 2 and which one fits kind of their roster and kind of their plans moving forward, I think would make the most sense. I have Scoot in that spot. Totally understand if you have Brandon Miller at number 2 as well. I'll throw Cam Whitmore in. I don't think he'll be the number 2 guy in this class.
We've reached the end of today's podcast. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll be back with you next week.
I think he's a dark horse, though. I think he'll be a top 5 guy in this class, and maybe he's not as likely to rise up to number 2 as Scoot or Brandon Miller or even maybe Amen Thompson. But I think he toiled away a little bit in obscurity this past season at Villanova. They underachieved based off preseason expectations, but explosive athlete. He's got a great frame, great size. He's very powerful. The way he plays is he plays very physical, and the athleticism that he brings to the table, I think, is really interesting. He's a really good catch and shoot weapon. Just based off what we saw at Villanova, I think going back to his high school days, he showed some flashes there as well. Synergy had him in the 84th percentile in catch and shoot opportunities last season. So I think you can pretty easily project him to the NBA level. Not sure he has like the same star power potential that, Scoot or Brandon Miller has. And maybe that will be why he ends up slipping a little bit farther past number 2. But I think there's some untapped creation ability. Like, he struggled a little bit with some of his decision-making on the ball. And I think that's an area where he needs to improve. But certainly I think Cam Whitmore is a guy, and thank you for not leaving the podcast.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, he's really adamant that we're going to talk about Cam Whitmore in the episode in the top 3 guys. We're really doing this. Okay. Yeah, no, go with it. Yeah. Don't let me stop you.
Yeah, just a preview of things ahead.
Right.
Last year was AJ Griffin. This year it's going to be Cam Whitmore. I have other guys that I'm very high on who I know you will likely poo-poo in the weeks ahead, including probably Taylor Hendricks, Grady Dick.
No, I'm high on Taylor Hendricks. I like.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep.
So future episodes, we may actually agree on a few things.
So let me give you my hot take, because we've been on Cam Whitmore Island long enough.
Yes.
And so I look at this draft somewhat in terms of tiers, and I think Wemby is in a class by himself. After that, to me, I think it's Scoot and Brandon. Those guys are 2 and 3. I think the Thompson twins. And let me preface this by saying I reserve the right to change my mind, because I know fans say, like, hey, the games are all over. Like, what more is there to learn? Well, we haven't watched all of the games yet. These guys all played 20, 30, if you're in the OT, maybe you didn't play as much or maybe you played more. I don't know exactly how many games OT played, but there's more film to see. There's more nuance to discover. There's certainly more intel to learn. So I do reserve the right to change my mind, but I tend to think that the Thompson twins could be potentially higher than anybody else in college basketball on my board. And my hot take is, and I wrote this a couple weeks ago when I did our first mock draft, the intel I'm getting from NBA scouts is that they are as high, if not higher, on Asar as they are Amen. And that's interesting, because the media, so many of our colleagues who cover the draft have really been praising Amen year round and talking about him as the better of the 2 twins. But if you go back and you look at OTE, the player who's won every single MVP award, both regular season and postseason, is Asar. Am I saying that right?
Asar, yeah.
Asar, yeah. So is Asar. Asar is also the better shooter of the 2. I mean, that's the Achilles heel of both of their games. They're big, athletic wings with some playmaking, passing potential. But the shot is considered the huge swing skill for both. And Asar is the better of the 2 shooters. Maybe not quite as dynamic athletically. That's certainly the public narrative. But again, I've talked to people who think, like, hey, it's 1A and 1B, NBA scouts. So behind the scenes, that's really, especially at the Final Four, because I was in Houston for the better part of 10 days between McDonald's and the Final Four. And you get all the college coaches and the NBA scouts in that area for that long. And, you just start having meals together and talking players and this and that. And that was the sentiment that I kept hearing, is that, like, hey, it's not as much of a consensus as the media is making it seem, in terms of Amen as the guy who could potentially, crack the top 3 or even the top 2. And we think it's Asar. And when you go back and look at who's really distinguished themselves in OTE, it is Asar. So that's my hot take for this first episode, to match your Cam Whitmore praise.
Interesting. That's really interesting, actually, because I am higher on Amen at the moment. And I think the argument is, like, Amen is a better playmaker. He's maybe a more advanced passer, but I'm looking at the OTE stats here. Asar led the team he led the team in assists this past season, and he was 6.1 per game. Amen was 5.9, so it was close. I do think that both of those guys are probably a little bit underrated in terms of how the NBA views both of those guys versus how the media views those guys, and they're I think clearly top 10 in most media boards. But yeah, I think we could be talking about guys who could end up going top 5 in this class. So
I think
that's
they could
interesting.
I think they could both go top 5. And I think part of the reason for the discrepancy there is I think the media put a lot of stock into last summer when those guys went and played abroad. And Asar was not as good in that setting. And so I think, a lot of this is circumstantial, what people are emphasizing the most and when which evals they are. But that's certainly a piece of the puzzle. You have to consider the level of the competition. But yeah, to me, and that's why, just to bring this full circle, like Wemby may be a generational type prospect, but the fact that he's already the consensus number 1, I don't want to say it takes the fun out of it a little bit, but like there's no debate there. So it's like, Wemby's number 1 and everybody knows it. And this is the other thing I'll tell you. The draft community in terms of NBA scouts, they're not really talking about Wemby anymore because that eval is done. It's like, all right, whoever gets the number 1 pick, they're going to take them. Let's figure out, 2 through 58. And those are the things that are still undetermined. And those are the things that I'm looking forward to being able to hash out here with you over the course of the next 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Last year we had Jabari Smith, we had Paolo Banchero, we had Chet Holmgren. A lot of people had different players at the number 1 spot in the class. I had Jaden Ivey as kind of my guy who I thought was the number 1 prospect, and I might not have been right. We'll see. Don't want to make any sweeping judgments after 1 year, but I think it was reasonable to have any of the top 4, top 5 guys as your number 1 in that class. This year definitely feels like if you have Scoot, if you have Brandon Miller as number 1, like you're just not being sincere. So
it's a very contrarian opinion to have anybody but Wemby at this point. And potentially clickbait. You know what would be fun? I'm going to put producer Nada on the clock here. You know what would be a fun episode? Should go, and I've done this on the on 24/7. I did 2 rounds of this, went back and rated the NBA rookies just to talk about like who lived up to expectations and who didn't. So
I like that.
I think that's got to be part of the process. I know like you've because whatever individual scouts value when they're making their projections, if you're not studying the results and seeing if your methodology hits, then how are you gonna get better? So I think that's a fun part of the process too.
For sure. Yeah, I like it. Nada, write that down. We're on the clock. That's going to do it for today. Fink, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. It's been a minute.
You too.
Please, if you're watching this, hit that like button. Tap the bell, as the folks say. Subscribe to the channel, the CBS Sports College Basketball
Leave
YouTube
a comment
channel.
about Boone's hot take of Cam Whitmore at number 2.
Yeah, tell us what you think. Do you like Asar over Amen? How do you feel about my Cam Whitmore love? Tell me about Taylor Hendricks. Talk about whatever. Talk about what you're watching on TV. Just leave a comment and subscribe. We will see you again next week. Thank you all. Take care.